Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in this session today. I'm Nahian Ibn Hassan, and today I'm going to present one of our recent research outcomes related to transcranial magnetic stimulation, or in short, TMS. The title of our presentation today is Virtual Head Model Embedding for Population-Based Uncertainty Quantification. I want to thank two of our other contributors, Dr. Daisy Wang and Professor Gomez from Purdue University from the Department of ECE. Let me first give you a brief introduction about the TMS. TMS is a non-invasive process where you apply a magnetic field through a coil to stimulate certain nerve cells of the human being. The way this system works is that you apply current pulses of 1 to 10 kilohertz to the TMS coil. The coil is generating some magnetic field, and that magnetic field is going to induce eddy current and electric field in the head. So once the field reaches a certain threshold at various locations inside the human brain, the neurons at those locations are triggered or activated. TMS has lots of applications. They are used for the treatment of depression or psychological disorders. Also, they are used in neuroscience experiments as well. There are two different aspects of administering TMS in clinical practices. One is the standard TMS, where the clinician places the coils over the cortical region of his subject. And another one is the neuronavigated TMS, where a robotic arm places the coil based on real-time ROI localization on MRI scans. So anyway, in both standard TMS and neuronavigated TMS, the coil is placed on the standard on the scalp using the 5 centimeter rule. So, and also the coil is placed based on the EEG coordinate on the scalp of a subject. Even if you have multiple subjects like the way we have shown here, if you want to stimulate the same cortical region across the subjects, the coil is placed at the assigned EEG coordinate without considering the structural differences of brain. So that's the current practice. But this poses a problem when you want to do the analysis on multiple subjects. Because due to the structural difference of the brain, the same EEG coordinate of the brain does not correspond to the same underlying structure of the cortical target. And that's why optimum coil position and orientation could be different across the subjects. Also, there can be operator error, which causes variation of the TMS-induced electric fields. So therefore, you are not stimulating the same cortical region across the subjects, and we need to find a single EEG position that is able to induce a high enough electric field on the targeted functional brain across the subjects. So we propose a population level workflow here. We have multiple co-registered head model. We position the TMS coil at the same scalp position across different subjects. And then we solve for the electric fields and get the statistics. So the workflow that you are seeing here in this slide is just for one chosen coil position and orientation. To predict the uncertainty for any coil position that is placed over any position over the scalp of a subject or different subjects, you need to do this for a huge number of coil positions scattered on the scalp. And each position should be associated with a wide range of coil orientations. So as you can assume, to solve for so many electric fields, if you follow a brute force approach, it will take a huge amount of time and computational resources, even if you do parallel processing. So we are proposing an approach to predict the electric field for all the chosen cortical positions and orientations within just 6 to 7 hours for a single subject. Whereas if you use the brute force approach, it would have taken almost 5 years. So that's a big deal. So let's see a brief overview of the TMS analysis workflow. At the first stage, we acquired the MRI scans. We have the T1 weighted and T2 weighted MRI scans. Typically, for the TMS, we need only these two different types of MRI images. So once we have these scans, we generate the virtual head models using the SIMNIBs. SIMNIBs is a cortical segmentation tool. It uses other freely available softwares like the FreeSurfer and FSL. It segments different cortical tissues and generates a finite element mesh here. So this finite element mesh contains the conductivity information of different types of tissues inside the human brain. So next, we use the finite element or boundary element solvers to solve for the equations, but also we need to place the coil here. Yeah. So now we have to solve for the induced electric field for all the positions and coil orientations, but we try to avoid these by using matrix completion algorithm. That's what we did. So I'm going to talk about this matrix completion algorithm within a couple of slides. But before that, I am going to talk about a little bit more about the virtual head model generation at the stage 2. So you have these MRI scans, you pass these MRI scans to the FreeSurfer or SIMNIPS pipeline, and the output is a co-registered finite element mesh. Here I am listing some of the major steps that are used to segment and mesh the whole brain, but there are other sub-processes. It's a huge workflow and implementing different image processing steps. The toolbox co-registers the head in a common frame, facilitating group level analysis. So if you have multiple subjects, the first stage is that you need to do the co-registration. And then it uses the bias field correction to make the intensity uniform. After that, it extracts the brain tissues from the skull and segments out different types of tissues like the gray matter, white matter, CSF, skull, etc. Next, the toolbox segments the whole brain into two different hemispheres, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. And all the processes after this step are applied on these two hemispheres separately. And finally, it deforms the triangles to triangle mesh to fit the gray matter and white matter, and also solves for any imperfections like the holes or any kind of deformities in the mesh. So I put some reference here if you're interested in additional details about generating these head models. So using this whole workflow, we have generated a huge data set containing over 4,700 subjects and roughly around 6,000 head models. The corresponding head models are, of course, co-registered. The corresponding MRI scans are collected from 11 different sources, and you can find out the MRI scans at these links that I have provided here in this slide. So generating each of these head models required roughly around 6 to 72 hours, and it's based on the quality and the resolution of the MRI scan. So it required a huge number of computational resources and time to generate these head models. So the database contains a huge number of head models, and some subjects have multiple MRI sessions. There are both healthy subjects as well as subjects with different neurological disorders. There are almost equal number of males and females, and there is a wide variability of age. So this database contains a huge number of variability. So now we have successfully developed this population database, and we need to set up the correct system for electric field analysis across different subjects. So as I already said a couple of slides earlier, that we have a couple of challenges due to structural differences of the human brain. So the first one is the coil placement uncertainty, and the second one is the EEG coordinate uncertainty. So the first one is actually the resultant of the second one. Anyway, the way we had solved it is that we sampled standard EEG coordinate from the unit sphere, and we project them on the scalp of each of the subjects. The projected points ensure the same angular cortical locations across the subjects. Next, we associate 360 coil orientations at each of these points over the scalp. So now this setup actually solves both of our challenges, because we no longer need to worry about the underlying cortical position for a chosen EEG electrode. All the sampled and projected points are along the same angular direction across multiple subjects. Okay, so we have solved our challenges, but there is still a computational problem. We have chosen over 2,655 for optimizing the coil orientation across the whole head and across multiple subjects. And each of those positions have 360 coil orientations. But the time for solving this electric field For each of these combinations, it will take roughly over 5 years for a single processor and for a single subject also. So even if you do the parallel computing, it will cost you time, money, and resources. And if you have a population database with so many subjects like the one we have developed, it's not possible. Hence, we need to find a way to predict the electric field for all of these coil placements by using some faster methods. So we conceptualize our problem by thinking of a matrix. Each column of these matrix is the solution of the electric field over the whole cortical structure due to a single coil placement. Computing a single column means you are doing a single FEM solution. So we want to calculate all of the columns by minimizing the number of FEM simulations. So we know the matrix is of low rank. As a result, we can use some interpolatory decomposition to construct this matrix without having to calculate all of the columns explicitly. So at the end of the day, we can think of our FEM solver as a method for multiplying a vector with this matrix. Since a matrix is low rank, we can multiply this matrix with multiple vectors to extract its columns, column space of them, or column space, and use this information to find a basis for it. The first 360 columns, so I want to clarify some of the details of this matrix formation. The first 360 columns, they correspond to position 1. The second 360 columns correspond to position 2, and so on. So these 360 columns means for each position, we place a coil with increasing angular positions from 1 degree to 360 degrees. And that's why it's a huge matrix, roughly around 1 million by 1 million, and we need to approximate this. To approximate this matrix, we follow a probabilistic algorithm, and it was proposed by Dr. Martinson in 2011. I have listed the reference here. So the approximation is done in 2 stages. In the first stage, we randomly choose a linear combinations of columns from this matrix, and then we multiply it by using the FEM. Then we find the basis for the column space by just using the keyword decomposition. And in the second stage, we find the row space by doing a left multiplication with the Q matrix. Now here, this left multiplication, what do we mean by this? What do we mean by this left multiplication? If you look carefully to multiply from the left, we use the reciprocity principle, which allows us to determine the electric field at a single position or a linear combination of positions due to all coil placements. So for this, we use our previously developed algorithm, the auxiliary dipole method. I have listed the corresponding references here. And for this, we use this ADM or auxiliary dipole method to compute each row of this matrix, and also computing the reciprocity integrals that I have shown here in equation 4 and 5. So you can find the algorithm in these references. It has been done in our previous projects. Okay, so in summary, I want to say that we create a random matrix. We use finite element to multiply with the matrix and determine a basis for the column space using the QR. And then we determine the row space by multiplying with the Q matrix by left multiplication. The multiplication from the left is done by using the reciprocity principle. So the obvious question is now here is that what is the rank of this matrix? We have assumed that it is of low rank. So how low rank of this matrix is? The number of columns here are roughly around 1 million. So how low could be the rank? Let's find it out. So in our analysis, if for approximating the matrix, we select a rank of L, let's assume that the rank of the matrix is L, we chose the first L-4 and L-5 singular values. It could be either one of them. So for the normalization curve, the reason we chose this because in one of our other research projects, we have found out that this approximation technique provides singular values which correspond to the first L-4 or L-5 actual singular values. So the lowest few approximated singular values tend to deviate from the corresponding actual singular values. And if we plot the singular values, the normalized singular values here, you can see that at a rank of 100 or beyond, it reduces to within 1 to 2% across the subjects. So this curve gives us an idea how the error might propagate across the subjects and with respect to rank. But we need to be sure about this. So that means we need to compare the actual error versus this normalized singular values, whether this normalized singular value curve, whether it can provide us the approximate behavior of the error or not. So to do that, we have chosen a single subject. We have chosen randomly 400 coil placements over the cortical space of the subject. And we solve for the electric field using our forward solvers. And we also predicted the electric field using our approximation metrics. So the relative error in between them are shown in the right figure. As you can see, as you increase the rank, the variation of the relative error, it almost follows the normalized singular value curve. So the normalized singular value shows you the propagation of error as you choose the rank for approximating the metrics. So remember that the rank that you choose is a parameter of your simulation. It can be, it means it's a hyperparameter. You choose the rank. So as you choose the rank, increase the rank, and it kind of reduces the error. And yes, and the normalized singular value curve does follow the propagation of error. Yeah. And as you can see, up to the rank of 100, the relative error reduces to within 1 to 2%. So let's just focus on this rank 100. Okay, let's just discard the lower ranks. We just focus on a single rank here and find out what's the result across different subjects. So we have chosen 16 different subjects for this analysis. Although we have a large database, but for this analysis, we want to know how the approximation was. And also doing the simulation for all of the subjects is not doable. And that's why we have chosen just 16 subjects. And for each of the subjects, we have chosen 400 cortical coil placements over each of these subjects. And yes, once we have plotted the errors, the relative error, it seems for each of the subject, the relative error is within the bound of 1 to 1.5%. Yes, there are some deviations. You can see here, there are some deviations here, but they are also within the range of 2.5% roughly. So then also the normalized singular value curve that you can see here, it follows the average relative error. So you can say that this normalized singular value, it shows you roughly the propagation of error with respect to rank. Yeah. So it could be a good estimation of the error, and you don't have to calculate all of these simulations. So you don't have to do that. On the right-hand figure, you can see that the time it takes for approximating these metrics increases almost linearly with respect to rank. So there is some upper bounds and lower bounds based on the quality of the meshes that we form from the head model segmentation tools. So it almost at rank 100, it takes almost 5.5 to 7 hours. Okay, so in this slide, you can see some of the random coil placements and corresponding electric field solutions. So I show you 6 different scenarios here. The coils are placed randomly with random orientations for different subjects. And then we calculate the actual field and also approximate the field. As you can see, for almost all of these scenarios, the approximated field resembles the actual field. Okay. So in summary, I want to say that the research outcomes that we are proposing is that first, low rank approximation of the electric field to coil relations results in a fast method for TMS analysis across subjects. Second, our low rank method requires almost 6 hours, or you can say 5.5 to 7 hours from the time curve instead of 5 years. So there's a reduction of time, almost 7,000 manifolds. And the third is that we have a population over 4,700 co-registered head models using MNI system. And this database is collected from variable sources and all from different kinds of subjects, with healthy subjects and unhealthy subjects. And we have used the EEG 1020 electrode placements. So in the future, our purpose is that we want to use this pipeline to determine the optimum coil placements across populations for TMS procedures. So here are some of the reference lists that you can investigate for more details about the different sub-processes and algorithms we utilized for our algorithm. So thank you so much for attending this session. Thank you so much.